What's happening, y'all? Welcome back. This is Rivals Down South, okay? Your show on Stadium where we cover the best conference in all of college football. That's the SEC. I'm one of your hosts, T-Bob Hebert, former LSU Tiger, and I'm joined by my guy, Hudson Mason, John Smoltz, long drive champion, former Georgia Bulldog. You can see him on ESPN calling college games. Hudson, what's going on, man? How you feeling here on this Thursday?
Feeling good, baby. Getting closer to game day. Excited to be here.
So check it out. Remember, youtube.com/watch stadium is one way you can watch a show, and you get comments in there. We'll address them throughout the show. So if you want to hop in the chat, go ahead and head over there. Hudson, I like this time of year because we are now a quarter of the way into a new football season. And one of the most annoying parts about the beginning of a new season is trying to discern, okay, who is truth, who are lies, contenders, all those guys. They're hard when you have small sample sizes. Well, now 4 games in, we got some information to play with. And so it's kind of interesting to take a look at, okay, where do we stand? Who do we think projects being the favorite going forward? And how are those projections different than what we would have thought just a little over a month ago? And so I want to start today in an area you're very familiar with, the SEC East. And it's obviously not who's the best in the East because it's Georgia, and it will continue to be Georgia until it's not. But who's the second best team in the East? And this is a question that has gained a lot of intrigue over the last 4 weeks. I mean, for one thing, we have Mizzou, 4-0 for the first time in 10 years. Haven't played any conference games yet. They're going to play Vanderbilt this weekend. I don't know we're going to learn much, right? They'll probably be 5-0. LSU will be their first test. On the other hand, you have Kentucky and Florida, both already 1-0 in conference. Florida's one of the best wins over Tennessee in that night game in the Swamp. I don't think it's Kentucky. It could be Florida. That loss at Utah still kind of seems. And then you arrive at Tennessee and South Carolina. And those are 2 teams that are going to be chopping it up this Saturday night in Neyland Stadium. Dark mode uniforms activated, but I want to highlight Tennessee because I had bought into the hype. I thought for sure they were going to be the second best team in the East. I thought under Heupel, they would basically be a 9-3 sort of team year in and year out from now on. Any geographical recruiting limitations they had were removed with NIL and the transfer portal. And yet here we sit, and Tennessee is on the cusp of taking a major step back. Hudson, when you look against Saturday at South Carolina, even though it's still early, would you qualify that as a must-win for the Volunteers?
Yeah, there's no doubt it's a must win. I mean, especially to keep up with Georgia, right? I mean, Tennessee has to go into that Georgia game in November with a chance to tie Georgia in the SEC East, and they're not going to do that. That game's going to be worthless from a fan's perspective if they lose another conference game. And so they got a challenge in Knoxville. If you remember this game last year, Tennessee, right at the end of the year, college football playoff hopes still alive, and Spencer Rattler put a 60-burger on Tennessee's defense. And so Tennessee fans have got to be super eager, as well as Tennessee, if you want to call it retribution for what happened last year. But I think Tennessee, to me, is the team that has the most upside, I think, of all the teams in the East. I think right now, the team that's been tested the most, and the team I would call the best behind Georgia, is Missouri. They got the best win, I think, over Kansas State. But I still, if you're asking me right now, who would I go to finish with second in the East when it's all said and done? I'm going Tennessee. Their defense is improved. Their run game is getting better every single week. The thing that sticks out to me from last year to this year so far, in a small sample size, T-Bob, is the lack of explosive plays in the passing game. It's non-existent right now. They're struggling to replace the Biletnikoff Award winner and Jalen Hyatt. Squirrel White hasn't been much of a factor. That's the biggest difference from the Vols last year to this year so far.
Well, how about this? Is this fair, Hudson? Because you're a former Georgia quarterback. I kind of feel like I'm way guilty of undervaluing Hendon Hooker last year, right? Anytime a guy has success, especially in an offense that is unique as something like Josh Heupel's, we immediately dissect the success and we say, okay, was this more player or is this more system, right? And I think I fell into the trap of kind of attributing a lot of Hendon Hooker's success to the system of Heupel. Now, like, absolutely it helps, right? But Hooker ran it to perfection. Joe Milton comes in, kind of struggles first game, but he looked good in the bowl game, right? And so I convinced myself, oh, no, it's a system. Joe Milton's going to walk in. He'll be just fine. But like you said, a just complete dearth of explosivity from Tennessee when that was the very thing that seemed to define them last year. Like, they're still
Yeah.
running the ball well. They lead the conference rush yards per game. That's ultimately what Heupel and Tennessee want to do, but they're not threatening you in the same way. And for South Carolina, I mean, you mentioned Spencer Rattler, 6 touchdowns in this game last year. And this is really what kicked Spencer Rattler off to now,
Yeah.
even though he doesn't have an offensive line in front of him, like, he's playing like one of the top quarterbacks in the conference. So is the problem Joe Milton right now with this Tennessee offense?
I mean, as a former quarterback, I'm not going to put it all on the quarterback shoulders. But at the end of the day, it's a quarterback-driven league, man. And we get way more credit than we deserve when things are going right, and we as quarterbacks get way more blame when things are going wrong. That's the nature of the position. If you don't like it, don't play quarterback. And so right now, for me, what I see is, and people forget this, T-Bob, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whenever it was that Heupel took over, I believe it was 2020. Uh, his original starting quarterback is the same guy that's starting this year. It wasn't Hendon
Yeah,
Hooker.
true.
His original starting quarterback was Joe Milton. And I had a
Yeah.
Tennessee game that year. People forget this. Some of the same things that led him to getting benched were problems with his accuracy. Nobody has ever questioned his arm. It's one of the most powerful, strong arms I've ever seen in my life. Put it up with Matthew Stafford, Jamarcus Russell. What he has to get better and get better quickly at is accuracy, placement of throws. We all know he can throw it out of the stadium, but can he hit guys on the run? Can he throw it accurately? The strong arm is really worthless if you can't hit open guys.
All H-Town Sports in the YouTube chat. Peyton Manning's not going to run out of that tunnel and take the field. The Vols will underperform. Well, again, I'm not so sure, right? I love what Spencer Rattler's done this year. We talked about Xavier Legette earlier this week, currently leading the conference right now in yards per game. I mean, just an electric player. Go watch some of the highlights against Mississippi State. I think he actually hit the fastest speed in the entire country last week, nearly 23 miles an hour. But South Carolina has flaws as well. I mean, the offensive line is a complete sieve. They're complete garbage. And look,
Yeah.
the bottom line is for Tennessee, like we said, this is a back against the wall game. You'd already suffered a loss you weren't expecting to against Florida. And this is such an insecure year for Tennessee fans because, okay, like T-Time tweeted in, Tennessee fans are like that old great uncle who can't stop talking about how badass they were in Vietnam. Well, okay, that's what's on the line for Tennessee this year, right? Last year was nice. It was awesome. But this year was supposed to prove what I thought, that, okay, no, Tennessee is back, and year in and year out, we will be relevant to Atlanta and also. If you lose to Florida and South Carolina in the first 5 weeks of the season, that's all gone. It like evaporates as quickly as it came, and you're in Neyland at night. The Vols have taken advantage. Major pressure on Tennessee this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. And look, we don't even know what Florida's going to look like at the end of the year. If they turn out to be a 7 or 8 win team, that loss to Florida at the beginning of the year looks even worse. So Spencer Rattler's playing incredible, but I think South Carolina's super one-dimensional right now. And I think that ends up being the difference. I like Tennessee in the game.
Yeah, I think Tennessee wins as well. All right, so that's the East. Georgia won, still seen on 2, probably Tennessee. Let's look at the West, which is as wide open as I can ever remember it. You have an Alabama team that is still very elite defensively, incredibly flawed offensively, kind of finding their way a bit. You have an LSU team that is incredibly elite offensively, incredibly flawed defensively. And then you have an Ole Miss and A&M team that are kind of somewhere in the middle of the two, right? Just kind of inconsistency among both. I'll start with you here, Hudson. When you look at the SEC West, who do you think should be the favorite to go to Atlanta at year's end?
I still think it's LSU, and I'm not just telling you what you want to hear, T-Bob. I picked LSU at the beginning of the year. I think, do they have question marks? Yes. But I think they've got fewer question marks in some of the most important areas than any other team, including Alabama. I think Alabama obviously is still trying to figure themselves out offensively. And I think this is LSU's division to win. Now, their one loss is out of conference, so their game against Ole Miss Saturday, their college football playoff hopes are at stake. And that's the thing that's unique about the SEC West, right? We're talking about the most dominant division in college football history, arguably, a division that has won 10 out of
Yep.
14 national championships in the 21st century. And here we are, almost a month through the season, and every single team in the West that we thought was going to have a legitimate shot at the college football playoff all has one loss. And so
It's
all of
crazy.
them are living on the edge week by week right now. And we're not even halfway through the season. But I do still think it's LSU's division to win.
Yeah, I kind of love it, man. We call it I've called it like the democratization of college football, where I thought that the transfer portal also, I thought it was going to end, I thought it was going to lead to this kind of concentration of power, but it seems to have kind of spread the power out. Like all these elite guys are getting picked off these rosters. You're able to plug holes so you avoid these disasters. And all of a sudden, everybody looks way more fallible than they did in the past. And so that's where it gets interesting because you know what? I still kind of like LSU too, admittedly biased, but it might not be. They're awful defensively, Hudson. I mean, awful. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff rate, I believe is what it's called, but it's just an analytic or that just looks at how often it doesn't care about yards, how often are opponents' drives ending either by punting the ball, turning it over, or turning it over on downs, right? LSU is 105th in the country. They're the only top 25 team that's not in the top 40. Like the defense, despite having talent, has been inexplicably bad. So you have that there. You have an Alabama offense that is inexplicably bad. So now's the door open for an Ole Miss or an A&M. If you had to choose Ole Miss or A&M, which one do you think could surprise and end up in Atlanta?
Oh boy, I would probably go A&M. I think LSU, or excuse me, Ole Miss, without a healthy Quinshon Judkins, and I think the guy's hurt right now. I think that limits Ole Miss's ability. So they've been scoring points, but I'm interested to see with Ole Miss, who's been averaging 40 points per game, but coming off a game last week where they only scored 10 against Alabama. I'm interested to see if there's a different Ole Miss against quality competition as SEC play starts to get going.
Well, Hudson, that's perfect. Because speaking of Ole Miss, we'll shift to the West and we'll look at LSU Ole Miss coming up this weekend. Another opportunity for Lane Kiffin to win a big game, something he has not been very good at. What's holding back? Can he do it? Next, here at Rivals Down South. Welcome back to Rivals Down South here on Stadium. YouTube.com/Watch Stadium. If you want to get involved in the chat. Got guys Sam Brief. Give me Florida second best in the East. We'll see. They go into Lexington and get it done. I'll give them a chance. But as we tease for the break, let's dive in to one of the biggest matchups this week, and it's taking place in Oxford, 5 p.m. So will be night by the time this thing is being decided. Going to be an incredible atmosphere as two of the SEC's more traditional old rivals in LSU and Ole Miss going to be going toe-to-toe. Now, Hudson, this is a series that LSU's dominated recently. They've won 6 of 7. It's a series, or it's a game that features the SEC's 2 highest scoring offenses. LSU right now at 42.7 points a game, Ole Miss at 42. So, basically equal. For Ole Miss, you already have the Alabama loss. So this is do or die if you think you're a team actually capable of getting to Atlanta. For LSU, maybe have a little wiggle room as your loss was out of conference. This is where this game gets weird to me, Hudson, is if we just went, and it's a testament to how confusingly bad the LSU defense has been at times. If we just went position group by position group, man to man, there is not a single position group where you would take Ole Miss over LSU. And so then you're like, okay, well then why is it 2.5 point spread? Because again, LSU's defense has been inexplicably bad this year. Ole Miss, even with the bad offensive line, and Quinshon Judkins not running the ball, still putting up 42 a game. So it's almost like, even though a lot of it doesn't make sense on paper, you're just kind of saying, well, Lane Kiffin will find a way. How do you score this one in terms of Ole Miss's offense against LSU's defense?
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, the one guy that you can't account for, I guess, on the field as one of the 11 is Lane Kiffin, and he's one of the best play callers in the country. I mean, look what he's doing without one of their best players, Quinshon Judkins, who's clearly hurt. He's injured. He is not the same guy that we saw last year, but they're still averaging 40 points per game. What's interesting to me about this Ole Miss team is while they're super explosive, the last 2 weeks, T-Bob, against Georgia Tech and against Alabama, their passing defense has given up some yards. And it's not like Georgia Tech and Alabama are 2 of the best passing offenses in the country. Georgia Tech threw for over 300 yards. Alabama, we know their problems offensively right now, especially in the passing game, are well documented. Jalen Milroe was super efficient against this Ole Miss secondary, 81%. So those things really concern me. And, Jaden Daniels can get it going, man. I mean,
yes,
this is a guy who's throwing for 300 yards in a blink of an eye. And so that's what worries me. None of the problems for either of these teams, to me, are on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, this could be an absolute shootout. It could be a 40 burger. If you told me it got into the 50s, I would not be surprised. But it's really the secondary for both teams. I think it could come down to which team gives up the least amount of explosive plays.
Yeah, so I mean, that's exactly how you end up with a 2.5 point spread, right? It's good on bad and good on bad. And so it has a shootout sort of feel. Where that maybe gets a bit worrying if you're a Lane Kiffin fan is Lane kind of needs this one, Hudson. He's 5-7 against top 25 teams at Ole Miss. 8-22 overall in his career. And even in those 5 wins, he hasn't had the win. He's had nice moments. Last year, Ole Miss starts 7-0. I think that 7th win was over a ranked Kentucky. They won it with defense at the end of the game. It was like their 13th win in the last 15 games. It was like, oh my God, Ole Miss is here. They're good, and they're going to continue to be good. And then they go from 7-0 to 8-5. So all of a sudden, if you do that same thing this year, and the wind is taken out of your sails immediately, you lose at home in Oxford, a 2.5 point spread game to LSU. Well, then it just feels like more of the same from Lane. Yeah, maybe 8-4, 9-4 with a bowl game. Maybe you lose the bowl game, you go 8-5. But I think Ole Miss fans are desperately looking for some noticeable improvement. And to me, that's really kind of what's on the line this weekend.
There's no doubt. I mean, if I remember correctly, it was this game against LSU last year that they lost. And then after that, the train fell off the tracks. And so, I'm with you, T-Bob. I keep asking myself, when is Lane Kiffin's resume going to catch up to his mouth? This is a guy who does a lot of talking, constantly poking the bear, talking in the media, sometimes so busy running his, dog's Twitter burner account, whatever it is, But the reality of it is he has not had that signature win since he's been in Oxford,
No.
and he's making $8.5 million a year, and the signature win has not accompanied him since he's been there. And so, is it this week? I don't know, but I doubt it. But I do know that he desperately needs one.
Yeah, so James says Kiffin has had every chance in the world to succeed at multiple different stops. Don't think he's ever going to win the big one. And then CFB expert says, well, what are the realistic expectations for Kiffin? He's not winning a natty, maybe close to an SEC title every few years. Yeah, I think that's it. Look, I think if you're Ole Miss and you're paying to coach $8.5 million a year, it's not because well, at least if you're honest with yourself, I don't think that you're thinking you're going to be a national contender. I do think that a trip to Atlanta at least once for the first time in school history, should not be too unreasonable to expect. I think that they want to be in that, like, they're in the kind of 8-4 range. I think they want to be in that 9-3, getting to 10 wins with a bowl game sort of range. I think that in a 12-team playoff, maybe you go in 11-2 and you sneak into a playoff. So it's not national championship or bust at Ole Miss, but Kiffin hasn't even been able to match that bar that we just kind of talked about right there. So we'll see. I think he's gonna have his work cut out for him. If they're going to win this game, Jackson Dart is gonna have to put this team on his back, and he's gonna have to carry them through a lot of Jaden Daniels points. So off the jump, Hudson, beginning of the show, we talked about how, we're 4 weeks in. We could start to see trends develop. So when we get back here on Rivals, we are going to give you the most shocking statistics we could find through the first 4 weeks of the season. Keep it locked right here on Stadium. Welcome back to Rivals Down South here on Stadium. Same. Lane will not win the big one unless he gets a job at Bama, Clemson, Georgia, FSU, one of the big power programs. Well, that's the thing. Lane's got to win to get one of those jobs. So we'll see. And we've seen the first 4 weeks of college football now in the SEC. Hudson, we dove into the numbers. We tried to find, okay, what are the things that have really shocked you in this first month? Hudson, what did you uncover in your research?
Yeah, how about this for the most shocking statistic that I could find a month through the SEC season? The leading rusher in the SEC is not a guy by the name of Rocket Sanders. It's not a guy, T-Bob, by the name of Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss. The leading rusher in the SEC is a guy by the name of Cody Schrader from Missouri. Leads the SEC in rushing attempts and rushing yards, averaging 8.2 yards per carry in the second half. And what's even crazier about this is where you looked where Schrader and Nathaniel Pete, their other running back there, were last year. Neither of them finished in the top 10 in rushing last year in the SEC. And so the craziest statistic that I could find a month through the season is that the leading rusher is coming from the offense at the University of Missouri.
Dude, 8 yards a carry in the second half. What in the hell? Okay. So I think I got a good one as well. Right now, if you look at the NFL, Alabama has 4 starting quarterbacks, 2 guys that are like arguably top 5 guys. They've got first-round receivers. The offense has been amazing for about a decade now, right? Well, through 4 games of the season, this Alabama offense is 12th in the conference in scoring. They are dead last in total yards. They're 13th in sacks allowed and 13th in TFLs allowed. So the Alabama offense went from being the best we've ever seen for about half a decade to absolutely awful. Hudson, hit us with the Tennessee one.
Tennessee one. Explosive plays. Tennessee last in the SEC with passing plays are 20-plus yards, only 9. Even Florida has more than Tennessee right now of passing plays of 20-plus yards with 12. So as we mentioned earlier, the explosive plays in the passing yard for the Vols, they don't have it. Maybe they'll get it going Saturday night against the Gamecocks.
Burks over Milton is not something I had entering the year. We'll be back tomorrow with a full weekend preview here on Rivals Down South.